There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of the Perfect Tips and Tricks with OESD. I am Carrie. I am thrilled to have you here as always. We are very excited. Today is a super fun day. We have Tamara Evans with us. She is going to be kicking off our second Embroider-a-long using the Quilter's Building Blocks collection, and she's going to tell us all about that. So let me bring up Tamara. Tamara, there you are. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good.
So tell us about what we got planned for today.
Oh, it's so fun. So we have come up with a small project that's very doable in these 3 days that we're going to do this week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Today, I'm going to reveal the blocks and how to make them and what you need. And then on Wednesday, if you have your 8 little blocks done, which won't take you very much time, and you're welcome to make more, if you want to do different configurations, we'll reveal the layout or layouts. So it'll be real fun, kind of a little mystery quilt.
A mystery. I think a mystery makes it even more fun. Some people will love that. Some people will struggle with that, but it's only 3 days. So I'm sure that the suspense is only a day.
Yeah, it's not going to kill you. Sorry, that didn't sound very nice. It will be fun. Very
Absolutely.
fun. So are you ready for me to get started?
Let's do it.
Okay, let me share my screen and we can go through. I want that screen. Share. And now I just need to pull up my PowerPoint. Where'd you go? There you are. And start at the beginning. So, do you see my screen now? Am I good?
Yep. Hang on one second. Let me just make it a little bit smaller. We have a slight scaling difference. I think you're good. Perfect.
Okay, great. So this was our tease last week. We're going to use, as you said, the Quilter's Building Blocks. It's collection number 51229, and you can find that on scissortailstitches.com. Don't forget to pick your favorite dealer when you go in and download it so that they get credit for it, because, we want to help our dealers out there. Absolutely. So here are the 2 blocks we are going to do.
I'm going to interrupt you because we didn't tell them the most important thing.
What was that?
If you guys have questions out there.
Oh, thank you.
I just see, between the two of us, we can be one full brain. So if you guys have questions, if you're curious about a process you don't understand, or just questions in general, ask your questions live. But then Tamara's going to start a thread on the Perfect Stitch, which is our Facebook group. So if you aren't a member of that, definitely join. And Tamara will start a thread there where you can ask questions, and she'll kind of stay on top of that in the next couple of days.
I will. I'm going to improve my Facebook skills. Okay, so here are the 2 blocks we're going to do. And the numbers on those we'll get into in a minute. There's 3 patches on one and 2 patches on the other. So there you go. And we talked about fabric. You're going to pick 3 fabrics. One is the background. In my case, the background is a pink print, kind of a pinky red print. And then my other 2 colors that are contrasting are black and white. And actually they're polka dots. But this kind of keeps me in tune and to where I need to place the fabrics. So you will have a background fabric in every single block. And then the other blocks, you'll go per the diagram. So to refresh your memory, or in case you missed it last Friday, here are your fabric requirements. Fabric A, which is one of the contrasting ones, you want 2 6-inch squares and 1 4.5-inch square. The same with fabric B, your other contrasting fabric. Then for the background, which can be busy or not, because you'll see mine's kind of busy, you want 2 6-inch squares, but 2 4.5-inch squares, not just 1, like on the other ones. So it's really simple. You've got 10 squares. I did that math right, I think.
I did that along with you. I was like, even I can handle that math.
Okay, good. 10 squares. That's all you got to cut out. Really easy. We're going to use fusible polymesh stabilizer. And you want a hoop that you can fit. It's really 5.5 inches is what you need. So if you have a hoop that doesn't quite go to 6, you can fit it in 5.
We had that question a couple times on the Facebook group. And so if you're a Bernina owner, just your standard medium, the oval hoop that you use for most things will fit this no problem.
Yes. Now, one thing that I didn't mention is that the Quilter's building blocks come in 2 sizes. We are using the smaller size. If you want to use the larger size, you're welcome to do that, but you'll have to do your own math this time. But it tells you in the instructions really kind of how much you need of what. So after you have all 10 of your blocks cut, you're going to subcut them diagonally. So make a cut straight through them. And so you end up with triangles. So these are my triangles. And as you can see, my background fabric is really kind of wild and crazy, but the other 2 contrast really well. So I think
I have another point. I'm sorry that I just keep thinking of things to say. Is if you purchase the Quilter's building block collections and you're making the blocks, if you're following the instructions that are in the collection, the cutting instructions vary a little bit between this and that. And that's okay, and that's by design, because when we have a fewer number of blocks as we do here, we can sort of be a little bit more particular about how you're cutting. So if you can follow either way, you're going to get to the same place, but just if you notice that there are slight differences in the cutting, that's okay.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. That's a very good point. So from this, you can see the contrast in the 2 fabrics and the background. And you could even do this kind of scrappy if you wanted to. If you wanted to do all reds and then all greens, you want to make it Halloween or Christmas or springtime, or to match a room in your house, anything. It's real fun, real simple. So let's get started. Our first block is a half square triangle, and we are going to make 4 of these, 2 of each one. Okay. 2 of each fabric combination. The background's in both of them. And it is design number 51229-01, the small half square triangle. And this is what it looks like, but this one has numbers in it. The one you bring up doesn't, but just so you have a go by, you'll know which piece you put down first. So let's see how
I'm just because I've got questions coming in. So this sort of template looking thing here that's on the screen with the 1 and the 2, the reason it's got that extra line is that you're actually looking at the embroidery file. So you're seeing all the steps here. So you're seeing and Tamara will show you, all the steps are shown in that template, because remember, this is not a standard sewing machine process. You're doing this in the embroidery machine.
Right, which makes it perfect every time.
That's right.
Your points will line up. That's a fun thing. If you've never done piecing in the hoop, this is kind of an intro into it. These blocks are very achievable, easy to do, and you'll see just how much fun it can be. So the first step then, you bring up this file in your machine. You're going to hoop your fusible poly mesh, shiny side up. That's the fusible side, the shiny side. And there's a reason for that we'll get to in a minute. Then load your machine and bobbin with some neutral thread that works with whatever you're sewing. I used black in my top thread, so it would show up better on photographs than the slides. So you just use whatever color you want. And I use my regular embroidery thread. So you can use cotton thread if you want. I just don't own that much of it. So you're going to hoop your poly mesh and put it on your machine. Then you stitch color number 1, which is the design and placement guide 1. We're going to have multiple guides in this. So basically it stitches out a picture of what the block's going to look like, you know, the shapes. This is like a template. If you've ever done foundation or paper piecing, you have a printed on paper or on some type of foundation, you have a printed guide to go by. Well, this is your guide. So that stitches first. Then we put down our background fabric, and we're going to do that first on all of these. Put the background fabric first on the top right-hand side, okay?
Facing up.
Facing up, yes. It's always right side up on the first fabric. So this, you want to make sure that you've covered that line down the center, and just that whole half of the square is covered up, okay? And you've got plenty of space to do that with the sizes that we cut these. So then you're going to stitch color number 2, which is a placement guide for the next fabric, okay? And you can see that line going down diagonally from the top left corner. If you can see that stitching line. Then you're going to take the hoop off, and you can trim that all the way back. Now, I recommend that you trim it to start off with, because what will happen if you don't, and you're putting a lighter fabric over a darker one, when you turn that fabric, you could see the fabric underneath, and you don't really want that shadowing through. So practice trimming it back, and then you can learn later on, oh, well, that's not going to show through the fabric covering it, my next patch, so I'm not going to trim it. It's entirely up to you. But I recommend you start out trimming it just so you get the hang of it. So trim it really close to that stitching right up to the edge, because that's the placement line for your next fabric, which you're going to place right side down so that they're right sides together.
So that's your creamy fabric there.
Yeah, and it's actually the back of my black dotted fabric.
Oh.
Yeah, that didn't come through much. You can barely see the dots, but so you're going to place it right side down along the long edge. That's your placement guide 2 that you just stitched. Then you're going to stitch color 3, which is the tack down and fold line 2. So for fabric 2, when you see a number in the description of the machine step that you're doing or color number you're doing, it's referring to that particular patch, like we had them numbered, remember? So this is fabric 2. We just stitched the tag down and fold line 2. And it does that just perfect, 1/4 inch seam allowance every time. You don't have to worry about it. Then you're going to flip that open or fold fabric A in this case, or your fabric open, so that it covers that second patch. And then I recommend that you get a little craft iron or some kind of iron, a small iron, and press that down. So here's what happens. When you do that, it sticks to the fusible. So plus you get a nice crease on your seam, which quilters like to have. So press that seam open, or press that seam down, and it'll stick to the stabilizer underneath it, okay? Since the fusible side is up. So caution, the fusible side is up. So don't put your big, really nice $200 iron down on top of that, because it will stick to the exposed part of the stabilizer. We don't want you to end up with a mess. Okay, then we stitch our last step, which is color number 4, the stay stitch. So this stitches around, it's actually your cutting line for the block. So we get rid of all those raw edges that are hanging out over our block. We don't need to cut them a scant 1/4 inch. In fact, I found it easy just to sit there and cut them with scissors, because I cut right along that line up nice and close, not on it, but just to the outside of it after I took it out of the hoop. And then you have your finished block. And it's all done. It's nice and smooth. You see how close I am to the seam line there, that final stay stitch. You want to press it with a medium hot iron. Don't get a real hot iron on that, but a medium hot, medium's great. And it will all be fused down perfect, and no bias edges hanging out for when we piece it or anything else. So it's really fun and easy. Any questions on the first block?
I don't think so. Somebody our friends at Eversone mentioned that a Lorista iron would work wonderfully here, which it is a wonderful iron. But as Tamara mentioned, you want to be careful about using a large iron when you're pressing in the hoop because you don't want to activate adhesives anywhere else besides underneath your fabric. And I think that's a great place. Tamara, I know we've gotten some questions about alternative stabilizers. So the poly mesh is great because you're going to, and you'll probably mention this, but you're going to leave that in.
Yes.
You're actually going to piece your blocks together. So it sort of stabilizes the blocks. But there are a few other options as far as stabilizer, which I don't want to speak for you. Maybe you are going to tell us about that.
No, but I can do that. So given the fact, oh, by the way, if you would tell our friends at Lordstar, I'd be.
Oh, Tamara, I lost your sound. That means you moved too much.
Sorry about that.
We got you.
I started to say, you can tell our friends at Lordstar, I'd be happy to test that iron on these. If they'd like to send me one. But if you are, because you've been sewing for the last month and doing, lots of things, and you happen to be out of fusible poly mesh or you can't get any from your store, there are other options. Lots of them. You want, one thing that I've used before is Ultra Clean and Tear. And I like the Ultra Clean and Tear fusible. And again, hoop it with the fusible side up. It's really soft. And because it's half wash away, half tear away, I leave it in. I don't tear it out because it doesn't add stiffness, just like the poly mesh doesn't add any stiffness to your quilt. But the first time I wash that quilt or whatever I'm making out of these, it will have a little bit of fiber left next to the batting, what's not caught under the stitching, and you won't even know it's there. So that's one of my favorites. You can do it without fusible. And one of the things I've done with that is use a water-soluble glue stick to hold the patches down. And just put a little on there around the edges and stick it down and press it and you're good to go. And of course that will wash out as well.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah, or even Ultra Clean and Tear Plus. I know we have one educator who really likes that because she didn't have to glue anything. It just sticks down.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those cases where there's a lot of right answers as far as stabilizer, which sometimes is frustrating when there's not one hard and fast rule. But that's, you think about what we're doing. We're making quilt blocks. You can either leave your stabilizer in if it's something soft or dissolvable, like you said, or you can take it out if it's just let's say you just had a tear away at home. You would just have to be very careful when you tear it away so that you don't distort your quilt blocks.
Right. Exactly. So I vote for leave it in whenever you can.
I'm with you on that one.
Okay.
Awesome. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. So how many blocks are we making of this one? Did you tell me?
2 of each combination.
Okay.
So one with the dark fabric up there and one with fabric A, one with fabric B, your contrasting fabrics. 2 of each of those. Did that make sense? Okay. Next, we are going to do a split quarter square triangle, which sounds way more complicated than it is. It's basically 3 triangles, a big triangle and 2 little ones. And this is where we use the smaller triangles that we cut from the 4.5-inch blocks. So we're going to make 2 of each of these combinations. Okay. Now, the thing to remember, and I learned this from experience, is you always want your background fabric to be in the bottom triangle there, patch number 2 on the diagram. That's the design to the right of it. So you're going to start with patch number 1, then you do patch number 2, then you do patch number 3. So just so you know which way it's going to go before you start stitching. But always have patch number 2 be your background. And then you won't end up with 2 extra blocks that you don't know what to do with because you messed it up. So that's the trick with that one. Now let's see how this one's done. Just like the other one, we're going to hoop poly mesh stabilizer or whatever stabilizer you're using. And if it's fusible, do it fusible side up. and stitch color 1, which is our design and placement guide 1 for our first patch. Okay, so there's our design. Then we're going to cover patch area 1 with fabric A or B for the second time you come through and do these, and have that fabric right side up. Remember, our first patch is always right side up, looking at you. Cover that whole triangle there under patch 1, then stitch color number 2, which is the placement guide. And it's very difficult to see. I meant to go back and like restitch it in white over this.
So along the bottom left of that.
Yes.
I think you can maybe use your mouse to sort of draw it.
Let me see if, can you see my mouse?
No, I take it back. I guess you can't.
Okay. No. Oh, well. So you'll see here, because it's the same place that color 3 stitches, you're going to take that off. Now, after you finish this, you want to trim that. Okay, trim it up next to placement guide 2, where it stitches down at the bottom from the center down to the bottom left. Okay, trim that. Then you're going to line up your second fabric, which is your background fabric, with that seam along that line, and then stitch color number 3, which is the tack down and fold line 2 for patch 2. Okay, so ignore the color numbers. Look at, what it's actually stitching. So it's doing the tack down and fold line for 2, patch 2. Then you're going to open that up and use your little iron to press it. I've also pressed this like right on my machine. I took it off to do photography because it made it easier, but you can press this. If you want to slide a pressing cloth under it, one of our pressing cloths, that would be great. Just remember to take it out before you stitch anymore.
Yes, we are not endorsing pressing on your machine. I don't want to get any phone calls, Tamara.
Okay, all right. So unfold the fabric, press it open with a medium hot iron. Again, you don't want to use a really hot iron on the poly mesh. Then you're going to stitch the placement guide 3. So that's for the third patch. So you're always going to stitch a placement line and then put your fabric down. So you can see in this picture a little bit on the red where that line was stitched, and I've already trimmed it all the way off because I had white fabric, the white dot going in there. So I don't want any extra fabric showing underneath it. So I trimmed it right at the edge, then placed my white fabric on there, exactly along that placement line. So I've got perfect coverage, and I stitch my tack down and fold line 3, which is machine step for color number 5. Then guess what we're going to do? Press it open.
My gosh, once you do one of these, you just keep doing it.
Yeah. So it's really simple. Press that seam open, get it to stick to your fusible if you're using fusible, and then stitch color number 6, which is the stay stitch. So that's our cutting line, if you will. And when you're done with those, you will have perfect 5-inch blocks. Perfect. So it will be very easy to line them up to stitch them together when you figure out on Wednesday how we do that. So once you're finished with the iron, that picture's really blurry. Sorry about that. Remove the block from the hoop, press it, and trim it right along that line. And that's all there is to it.
Wow, that's not so bad, huh?
No, not bad at all. So 8 blocks or more. If you want to stitch more of these 3 ones, I forgot what we called it, the quarter square.
Split. That's the split half square triangle, I think is what it's called. Split quarter square triangle.
Square triangle, yes. You could do a couple of extra in this. You get a little bit different layout if you want. But we'll have fun with that on Wednesday.
Will you show the slide where it gives us how many of each block we're making?
Yes.
I think, right. So if anybody.
Yeah, and I will post that on
Perfect Stitch.
Yes. So you want 2 of each of these.
Okay.
And I have it all on one somewhere in my stash of stuff, not in this presentation, and 2 of each of these.
Wonderful. Well, that is exciting. I can't wait to see what everybody does.
Yeah, and post your blocks. Everybody loves to see, because sometimes I found it a little bit daunting, and I've actually done 2 different colorways. I did one that was Halloween, and in blacks and purples. I'll show you that one on Wednesday. And so Christmas, Halloween, whatever you've got hanging around, great way to diminish your stash by a little. Post what your blocks. It'll be fun. Can't wait to see what you do. And we will reveal on Wednesday, actually multiple ways to put this together into a fun little project.
That's awesome. That sounds like a super good time. I will admit that I have made my blocks already to be prepared for all of you guys. And I have been playing with layout options. I can't wait to see what Tamara has, what you've got in store for us.
It's really fun.
You'd think I could figure it out, but it's not as easy. Once you make them, you start playing with them, and you may come up with ideas that are above and beyond kind of what we're thinking. So you really get to do whatever it is you want to do. But we'll give you some suggestions for sure. And so Wednesday we'll reveal that, the layout options.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So before we go, just want to remind you that tomorrow we have Tim back with us again. Tim is one of our fabulous artists, and he will be talking to us about the process of the latest release that will launch tomorrow morning. So very fun. I think you'll really enjoy talking to Tim tomorrow. And then we will see Tamara again with us on Wednesday. So that's what we've got in store for the next couple of days. I hope you guys will join us with the Embroider-a-long. So we'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Happy stitching.